Sehr verehrter Herr Präsident.
President, ladies and gentlemen, members of the European Parliament, Presidency of the Council, colleagues. 1 year ago, in September 2015, in my speech on the state of the European Union, I stated that the State of the Union left much to be desired. I said then it didn't only apply to Europe, but in our union there wasn't enough union. In spite of the progress which has been made, it still applies. The European Union still does not have enough union. Some things have improved, but others haven't, and this has something to do with the crisis in the European Union. There are too many areas in which we spontaneously or unspontaneously can't meet. The scope in which we cooperate together is too small. Far too often, national interests are brought to the fore. We shouldn't misunderstand this. European integration cannot be left or bow to the interests of the individual member states. Europe cannot become a melting pot, a colourless melting point. Europe lives and draws from its diversity. Although it's often stated that this is the case, the Commission does not intend to get rid of the nation states. We don't destroy, we don't want to undermine, we want to construct. We want a better Europe. Europe is not going down the path of nationalization. It can never become that type of nationalized area, but there are splits out there, and often fragmentation exists where we need further effort from the Union, and that is leaving scope for galloping populism, and we cannot accept that, because populism does not solve problems. On the contrary, populism creates problems, and we have to be aware of that and protect ourselves against it. It's really high time, more than ever, that we really take a clear look at the situation. Unemployment continues to be far too high in Europe, although between 2013 and today, 8 million new jobs were created. And employment is constantly rising. But social injustice continues, and that's why very quickly we have to get to work on the basis of social fairness and equity. We have to work on the energy side as well. Europe is not social enough. We have to make that clear. Debt in Europe continues also to be at too high a level, despite the fact that we have seen a drop of deficit rates down to 1.9 from 6.2. And so we don't want to see a flexibility pact. I think we need to show intelligent flexibility in applying all of this so that we don't break or hinder growth. I think we also need to look into the eyes of those who are observing us from afar, our friends and partners worldwide, who all deeply regret Brexit, and they are wondering whether Brexit is the beginning of the breakdown and disintegration process for the European Union. Allow me to state here and today that we respect and at the same time regret the UK decision, but the European Union as such is not at risk. And we would be happy if the request for Brexit could happen as quickly as possible so that we can take the specific steps which need to be taken. And so that our relations with the UK, which must remain on a friendly basis, can take a new shape. And that means that only those can have unlimited access to the internal market who accept that there will be free access for persons and goods. There can be no à la carte access to the single market. Our partners constantly raise the question as to whether the EU is still in a position to enter into trade agreements with the rest of the world. We are the biggest trading area in the world. We have trade agreements with 140 countries worldwide. I'm not a blind fanatic on this, but I do believe that we cannot leave aside the impact of all of this on trade, and trade means more work. Trade means more jobs. 30 million jobs in Europe are dependent on exports. 1 in every 7 jobs in Europe depends on our exports to other parts of the world. 1 billion more in export volume creates an additional 40,000 jobs in Europe. And therefore, I am very much behind the trade agreement with Canada. It's the most progressive, the best trade agreement we have ever entered into. The guarantees that we need can be specified in the various different ratification procedures, and we can rule out the concerns which exist, but we cannot backtrack on this with Canada. Our partners around the world, particularly in the USA and China right now, but in the future also in India and Japan, are raising questions of climate change of us. The Paris Climate Change Agreement is a global and legally binding agreement, and it wouldn't have come into being in the absence of the European Union. We were the pioneers. We drove this forward. And sometimes we also urged others quite forcibly to act. The really call on steps to be taken, because very few EU member states have done this as yet. We are calling on EU member states to ratify the Paris Agreement. Basically, dragging our feet on ratification undermines our international credibility. It makes us look ridiculous. And basically, our links amongst ourselves, our interactions depend on this. We're not the United States of Europe. The speech I am making today cannot be compared in any way with the State of the Union by the US President. We are much more diverse in Europe and stronger, and that's why it's hard to understand for some people. But the history, the bad history of Europe, made us this way. It made us what we are. That is no reason for us to make things even more complicated and difficult to understand than they are already. A committed Europe requires courage, but we need to speak in committed terms about Europe in our national parliaments as well, not only here in the European Parliament.
In Brüssel laut Ja sagen.
In Brussels, if we pretend that we weren't in there when joint decisions were taken, I think we'll be running counter to all logic and coherence. The citizens of Europe cannot be fooled any longer. We have to look them straight in the eyes. People in Europe don't want this petty envy between the various different institutions. The people expect of Europe that they see clear results, and the results which should be implemented in due time.
Colleagues, I'm therefore
Kære kolleger, derfor foreslår jeg en positiv dagsorden over europæiske aktioner i de næste 12 måneder. Det er fordi, jeg mener, at de næste 12 måneder er meget vigtige, hvis vi ønsker at genskabe vores union, hvis vi ønsker at hele bruddet mellem øst og vest, som er åbnet i de seneste måneder. Vi skal vise, at vi kan gøre tingene hurtigt. Vi skal vise verden, at Europa stadigvæk kan arbejde sammen. Vi skal smøge ærmerne op. Jeg har sendt et brev med det budskab til formand Schulz og premierminister Fico her til morgen. De næste 12 måneder er et vigtigt tidspunkt, hvis vi skal levere et bedre Europa, hvor vi beskytter den europæiske levevis, hvor vi styrker vores borgere, og hvis vi skal tage ansvar. Jeg er overbevist om, at den europæiske levevis er værd at bevare. Det er mit indtryk, at mange synes at have
what it means to be part of this European Union, of this union of Europeans, to remember why European nations chose to work together, to remember why crowds celebrated solidarity in the streets of Warsaw on the 1st of May 2004, the date of accession of this great Polish nation, because Poland is a great nation. To remember why the European flag waved proudly in Lisboa or Porto, Madrid and Sevilla, welcoming the young democracies of Spain and Portugal in our sphere of solidarity and freedom. To remember that Europe is a driving force that can help bring about unification of Cyprus, something I am supporting the two leaders of Cyprus in. It has to be done, and it has to be done now. Above all, Europe means peace. It is no coincidence that the longest period of peace in written history in Europe started with the formation of the European communities. 70 years of lasting peace in Europe, in a world with 40 active armed conflicts which claim the lives of 200,000 people year after year. Of course, we still have our differences. Sometimes we fight, but we fight with words, and we settle our conflicts around the table, not in trenches. An integral part of our European way of life is our values, the values of freedom, democracy, the rule of law. We Europeans can never accept, never, Polish workers being harassed, beaten up or even murdered in the streets of Essex. We Europeans stand firmly against the death penalty. And we Europeans also believe in independent, effective justice systems. Effective justice systems support economic growth and defend fundamental rights. That is why Europe promotes and defends the rule of law everywhere in Europe. Being European means the right to have your personal data protected by strong European laws. Because Europeans do not like drones overhead recording their every move, or companies stockpiling their every mouse click. This is why Parliament, Council and Commission agreed in May this year a common European data protection. In Europe, privacy matters. Being European also means a fair playing field. This means that workers should get the same pay for the same work in the same place. And this is why the Commission stands behind our proposal on the Posting Workers Directive. The internal market is not a place where workers can be exploited or subjected to lower social standards than others. Europe is not the Wild West, but a social market economy without social dumping. A fair playing field also means that in Europe, consumers are protected against cartels and abuses by powerful companies, and that every company, no matter how big or small, has to pay its taxes where it makes its profits. I was promising you that my Commission would fight against tax evasion, and many of you didn't believe me, but that's what we are doing. We are delivering. This Commission is delivering on the fight against tax evasion. Being European also means standing up for our steel industry. We already have 37 anti-dumping and anti-subsidy measures in place to protect our steel industry from unfair competition. But we need to do more, as overproduction in some parts of the world is putting European producers out of business and the noble European steelworkers out of work. This is why I was in China twice this year to address the issue of overcapacity. This is also why the Commission has proposed to change the lesser duty rule. We call on all Member States and on this Parliament to support the Commission in strengthening our defence instruments. We should not be naive free traders, but be able to respond as forcefully to dumping as the United States of America are doing. A strong part of the European way of life I want to preserve is our agricultural sector. The Commission will always stand by our farmers, particularly when they go through difficult moments, as is the case today. Last year, the dairy sector was hit with a ban imposed by Russia. This is why the Commission mobilised €1 billion in support of milk farmers to help them back on their feet, because I will not accept that milk is cheaper than water. Being European, for most of us, also means the euro. During the global financial crisis, the euro stayed strong and protected us from even worse instability. The euro is a leading world currency, and it brings huge, often invisible economic benefits. Euro area countries saved €50 billion this year in interest payments, thanks to the European Central Bank's monetary policy. 50 billion extra that governments can and should invest into the economy, 50 billion that can be used for debt reduction. And, by the way, the 5 Presidents' report on the deepening of the euro area describes an ambition the Commission is still sticking to. I wish all this was recalled more often, everywhere in Europe where elected politicians take the floor. The European Union should not only preserve our European way of life, but empower those living it. We need to work for a Europe that empowers our citizens and our economy. And today, both have gone digital. Digital technologies and digital communications are going into every aspect of life. All they require is access to high-speed internet. We need to be connected. Our economy needs it. People need it. And we have to invest in that connectivity now. That is why today the Commission is proposing a reform for our European telecommunication markets. We want to create a new legal framework that attracts and enables investments in connectivity. Businesses should be able to plan their investments in Europe for the next 20 years. Because if Europeans invest in new networks and services, that is at least 1.3 million new jobs over the next decade. And connectivity should benefit everyone. That is why the Commission is proposing a fully deployed 5G across the European Union by 2025. This has the potential to create a further 2 million jobs in the European Union. Everyone benefiting from connectivity means that it should not matter where you live and how much you earn. So we propose today to equip every European village and every city with free wireless internet access around the main centres of public life by 2020. As the world goes digital, we have also to empower our artists and creators and protect their works. Artists and creators are our crown jewels. The creation of content is not a hobby, it is a profession. I want journalists, publishers, authors to be paid fairly for their work, whether it is made in studios or living rooms, whether it is disseminated offline or online, whether it is published via a copying machine or hyperlinked on the web. The overhaul of Europe's copyright rules we are proposing today does exactly that. Empowering our European economy means investing not just in connectivity, but in job creation. The 350 billion investment plan for Europe, which we agreed here, has already raised 160 billion in investments in its first year of operation. Over 200,000 small firms and start-ups across Europe got loans, thanks to the European Fund for Strategic Investments. And now we'll take it further. Today, we propose to double the duration of the fund and to double its financial capacity. With your support, we'll make sure that our European Investment Fund will provide a total of at least 500 billion, half a trillion of investments by 2020. And we will work beyond that to reach 630 billion by 2022. Of course, with member states contributing, we can get there even faster. Along these efforts to attract private investments, we also need to create the right environment to invest in. European banks are in a much better shape than 2 years ago, thanks to our joint European efforts. Europe needs its banks. But an economy almost entirely dependent on bank credit is bank for financial stability. And it is bad for business, as we saw during the financial crisis. That is why it is now urgent we accelerate our work on the Capital Markets Union. The Commission is putting a concrete roadmap for this on your table today. A Capital Markets Union will make our financial system by far more resilient. It will give companies easier and more diversified access to finance. Imagine you run a startup and your bank refuses you a loan. Right now, the options are very limited. The Capital Markets Union will offer alternative, vital sources of funding to help startups get started. Business angels, venture capital, market financing. To just mention one example, our proposal on securitization has been on the table of the co-legislators for almost 1 year now. It has the potential of freeing up to 100 billion euros of additional finance for European businesses. So let us please speed up its adoption. Our investment plan worked better than anyone expected inside Europe. And now we are going to take it global. Today, we are launching an ambitious investment plan for Africa and the neighborhood, which has the potential to raise 44 billion in investments. It can go up to 88 billion if member states pitch in. This will complement our development aid and help address one of the root causes of migration. With economic growth in developing countries at its lowest level since 2003, this is crucial. The new plan will offer lifelines for those who would otherwise be pushed to take dangerous journeys in search of a better life. It has to be done. As much as we invest in improving conditions abroad, we also need to invest in responding to humanitarian crisis back home. And more than anything, we need to invest in our young people. I cannot and will not accept that Europe is and remains the continent of youth unemployment. I cannot and will not accept that millennials I will not accept that the Generation Y might be the first generation in 70 years to be poorer than their parents. Of course, this is mainly a task of national governments. You are not a part of, I know. But the European Union can support this effort and their efforts. We are doing this with the European Youth Guarantee that was launched 3 years ago. The Commission enhanced the effectiveness and sped up delivery on the Youth Guarantee. More than 9 million young people who got a job, traineeship or apprenticeship because of the European Union. And we will continue to roll out the Youth Guarantee across Europe, mainly as far as apprentices are concerned, improving the skill set of Europeans and reaching out to the regions and young people most in need. The European Union can also contribute to helping create opportunities for young people. There are many young, socially minded young people in Europe willing to make a meaningful contribution to society and help show solidarity. The word solidarity appears 16 times in the treaties. Our European budget is a living proof of financial solidarity. Euro is an expression of solidarity, and our development policy is a strong external sign of solidarity. And when it comes to managing the refugee crisis, we have started to see solidarity. I'm convinced much more solidarity is needed. But I also know that solidarity must be voluntary. It must come from the heart. It cannot be forced. It cannot be imposed. I'm urging the Slovak presidency to bridge the divergences and differences between those who are reluctant to integrate refugees in their societies and those who are convinced, as I am, that a fair share in relocation and resettlement is of the essence. I am asking a strong and immediate action both from Greece and the European Union to protect what we call in French les enfants non accompagnés. Without protection of these children, the European Union is betraying its historic values. In the same spirit, the Commission is proposing today to set up a European Solidarity Corps. Young people across the European Union will be able to volunteer their help where it is needed most to respond to crisis situations like the refugee crisis or the recent earthquakes in Italy. I want this European Solidarity Corps up and running as soon as possible, and by 2020 to see the first 100,000 young Europeans taking part. By voluntarily joining the European Solidarity Corps, these young people will be able to develop their skills and get not only work, but also an invaluable human experience. Monsieur le Président,
President, ladies and gentlemen, President of Council, a Europe that protects is a Europe which defends itself both inside and outside its borders. We need, and this is a priority, to do this to counter terrorism. As of 2004, Europe has suffered more than 30 terrorist attacks. 14 have happened over the past year. We've all maintained solidarity throughout our suffering and mourning. We must take a collective approach to this. We must be truthful and faithful to ourselves, to our values, to our multicultural, open society. We need to show terrorists that they have no chance when they try to attack these values. This tolerance which is ours, cannot fly in the face of our safety and security, and that's why the Commission, as at the outset, has given a priority to security. We have set up special systems for the return of fighters, and we are combating the financing of terrorism. We are using the internet to combat terrorist propaganda, and we are combating radicalization in prisons and elsewhere. But we still have a lot of work to do, and we must know which individuals are crossing our borders. And it is for this reason that we defend our borders with the new special Frontex agency. There are agents in Greece at the border with Turkey, and we have more than 100 agents in Bulgaria. The member states and the institutions must work closely in order to make sure that we can set up this new agency. I would like to see the deployment as of October of 200 border guards and 50 additional vehicles at the border with Bulgaria. We will also defend our borders in terms of those who cross our borders, we will be very strict as to who can cross the borders, and this is something that we are looking to implement by the end of the year. Anyone coming into the European Union or leaving the European Union will be registered, will have the date, the place, and the reason as to why the person is moving across borders. By November, we will be proposing a new information system, a travel information system, which will be automated. We will be able to determine who has the right to travel into Europe. And so in this way, we'll see who will be traveling into Europe before that person even arrives on our territory. The security of our borders also means that we have to give a priority to the exchange of information and intelligence. And so we are strengthening Europol to this end, because we are giving Europol greater access to databases and giving them the necessary means to carry out their work. And this has to be in line with our ambitions. A Europe that protects also should protect outside its borders. The world is getting bigger every day, and Europe is getting smaller every day, demographically and economically. If we wish to maintain our influence in the world, it is obvious that we have to work together, and it is together that we will be able to face challenges. If Europe is proud of being a soft power, we have to admit that this is not sufficient in a world that is ever more dangerous. Let's look at the conflict in Syria as an example. The consequences for Europe of this conflict are immediate, but where is the Union? Where are the member states in the negotiations to try to solve this conflict? Federica Mogherini, our High Representative, Vice President of the Commission, is doing a remarkable job, and that's not just my opinion. But what we need is a European Minister of Foreign Affairs. This is something that should be similar This is something that will bring together the national diplomatic forces in order to weigh in international negotiations. And this is why I'm asking for us to draw up a European strategy for Syria. Federica should have a seat at the negotiating table on the future of Syria. Europe, ladies and gentlemen, should be stronger, should take a stronger point of view in terms of our defense. We can no longer depend on the singular power of individual member states. Together, we have to make sure that we protect our interests. Over the past 10 years, we have participated in more than 30 military and civil missions carried out by the European Union. But we don't have a permanent structure, and without that, we're not able to work efficiently. We must have a European headquarters. And so we should work towards a common military force, and this should be in complement with NATO. More European defense in Europe doesn't mean less transatlantic solidarity. From an economic point of view, bringing together our military resources could be clearly justified. We can use cooperation, and that is something which is very useful, because the lack of cooperation is something which is costing the European Union 20 to 100 billion a year. So we must do something in this area. in order to guarantee the solidarity of the European Union, the European defense industry should prove its innovation. And for this reason, we're proposing by the end of the year the creation of a European Defense Fund to actively stimulate research and innovation in this area. The Lisbon Treaty allows member states who wish to do so to make their capacity available through a permanent structure. And I think it's high time to to avail ourselves of this possibility. President, the final point which I wish to touch upon has to do with our collective responsibility, and I'm calling on all of the European Union institutions and each of the member states to assume more responsibility. We need to do away with old spats which could lead to failure, because we cannot survive without working together. Europe needs to be better explained, and I've asked the commissioners over the coming weeks to visit national parliaments in order to discuss the European Union, and the commissioners have gone to national parliaments more than 350 times, and I'd like for them to do that more now. Europe can only be built if it's understood. It has to be better explained. It can only be built with the member states, not against the member states. And so the Commission is to be a political commission which gives rise to lots of strange ideas. But the Commission needs to be there for the citizens. We need to listen to the citizens. We need to listen to the European Parliament and to the member states. And we do listen to our citizens, and we would like to do that more intensely. Sometimes I read that the people lock themselves up in their ivory towers at Berlaymont and don't want to listen to others. Some people think that I'm not listening to others, but to those who think that are highly mistaken. Every single day I talk to the European citizens because this is my duty, this is everyone's duty. As I said earlier, the Commission has withdrawn we have reduced the number of initiatives by 80%, and we are reviewing all of the legislation in effect, because we need to focus on the areas in which Europe can give us a true added value. And this is the only way in which we can make Europe a space of subsidiarity and solidarity. And any policy at the Commission would mean that we would have to correct any technocratic errors that may have arisen. The Commission has done away with roaming charges for cell phones, and that's why we have done away with the roaming charges, and this is something that happened in the summer. And there were very good intentions behind doing away with the roaming charges. It was very good in terms of the technicalities, and as of next week, you will see a new draft which is improved. When you travel in Europe with your mobile phone, you will be able to feel at home anywhere in Europe, thanks to these new roaming rules. being responsible means that we have to take responsibility for our actions vis-a-vis our citizens, and that's why I would like to change this absurd rule that we have, whereby commissioners who stand for election have to give up their posts. The commissioners should not have to do this because this is not a rule that applies elsewhere. We must encourage the commissioners to be to live up to democracy and and our voting rights in Europe. And so, President, I'm as young as the European project, which is celebrating 60 years next year in March, maybe a little bit older. So I've experienced all of this. I've lived through this project, and I've dedicated my entire life to this. I've done this from personal conviction, and I have not hesitated. I believe in Europe and the stability in the continent and work and social progress. My father believed in this as well, and he knew how precious Europe was and how fragile it was because he had to live through the war. He had to fight in the war against his own will and against the will of his country. And my father instilled in me these values. And what are we instilling in terms of values to our children? What is the heritage? Are we giving them? Is this a union that has forgotten its past, that has no vision for the future? Ladies and gentlemen, our children deserve better. They deserve a Europe which preserves their way of life, which champions that way of life and protects it. And so it's high time for us, the citizens and the institutions, the governments, to all take their responsibility to build that Europe and to build it together. Yes, I know that there are certain debates when we talk about the future of Europe. There are some Pollyanna optimists, and then there are the pessimists who counter everything. But I think that that Europe has a mission at home and in the world. But you have the pessimism, which only looks at the faults, and then you have the rosy view. Between that, you have the resolve of those who will not give up, who will work in the spirit of creating something for future generations. And that is the resolve of those who came before us. And I'm calling on us to have resolve so that we can get over our differences. The history will not remember our names. We will be remembered by the force of our resolve and our convictions. And so this needs to be integrated. History will not remember us. History will remember our mistakes and will make us responsible for what we do in this generation. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr